He has one of the best German WeChat live stream channels. There are live streaming from Alexanderplatz. Please give it up for Marcel Munch, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Marcel, you are going to introduce your panelists.
Of course, of course.
Okay, who wants to have a beer? No? No beers?
My life.
All right, Dirk, thank you so much for the nice introduction. Welcome everybody to our panel on Asian-German Digitization Hub, collaborating, innovating, and disrupting to deal with emerging innovation platforms. I know it's a really long title, also I curated this panel out of my very intrinsic motivation and being a little bit selfish here, because actually my background is that I launched a startup from Berlin into China. So it's an e-commerce business, and we launched an application into the Chinese market. As Dirk mentioned, we even made it into Chinese TV. However, I also realized that, and we heard this in this talk before, that just speaking the language, Chinese, and being able to live in China and so on, that isn't enough by itself. So you need strong partners, you need the resources as a startup in order to succeed in China. And at the same time, when we got involved in some projects with corporates going to China and they want to do some innovation projects in China, we also found out that even at the corporate level, there's a lack of understanding of the Chinese market. And it's still in a very early stage regarding an understanding of digital trends that are happening in China, even at the corporate level. We at the same time, So I thought it's a good time to rethink how corporates and startups between Germany and Asia could work together and dealing with innovation platforms. And by innovation platforms, I mean that China is becoming a key player in key technologies such as artificial intelligence, gene editing, on e-mobility, and also blockchain technologies. And those kind of technologies, they will have implications for business models of corporates and SMEs all over the place in different kind of categories and business models. So I'm really delighted to have the panelists with me today, which will be discussing this idea of having a digitization platform between Germany and Asia. And the first participant is Mr. Philipp Wehn, who is part of Siemens Mobility here in Berlin, and he will tell us a little bit more about how it's actually working with startups here in the Berlin ecosystem. We also have Mr. Dr. Ulrich Kleipers. He is principal of Roland Berger here in Berlin, and he's got an intensive experience of launching innovation hubs all over the world. The next panelist will be Mr. Augusto Pellarini, who is with Deutsche Telekom and responsible for digital transformation. And I found him when he was publishing an article in Digicom magazine with exact the same idea of creating a digitization platform between Germany and Asia, and he will tell you more about it. And last but not least, Mr. Marius Swart, who is the co-founder of HenkelX, and who strives to build an open innovation platform with Henkel. So my first question goes to Philipp. Philipp, please tell us a little bit more about what your daily business looks like what are the key technologies that you're working with, and how do you cooperate with startups in Berlin?
Well, thanks for having me here. Again, I'm Philipp, and currently I'm working on digital innovations within Siemens Mobility that are at the corner or sometimes outside of our portfolio. So we had lots of input today from high-level thoughts from Siemens, but also from other companies. how you can interact with startups, how you can invest in startups. But sometimes the small stories have to be told as well, and that's what I'm here for today. And that's why I brought something tangible with me today that was built by a startup, that was developed with an idea from Siemens, but always with the help of a startup ecosystem. So what we as Siemens Mobility do is we have an innovation lab at Factory Berlin, which is called the Community of Innovators, a co-working space here in Berlin where corporates like Siemens, Audi, also Daimler Financial Services are located, and where we can interact with startups, take ideas like this out of our organization. And that's exactly what I do. So last year we had an idea, we had a slide, and we wanted to create a solution, MVP level, test it with the market pretty early. And yeah, this is how my day-to-day work looks like. And of course, when it comes to innovations, and especially digital innovations right now, we look at things that are in the IoT field. We look at markets that are growing, which is in this case wearable technology. So yeah, we broaden our horizon in the startup ecosystem. And yeah, in the next 40 minutes, I will share some stories how to make startups happy and how corporates can benefit from startups as well.
And if you can do a quick elevator pitch about this idea, what is it all about?
Of course I can. So this is called Safe Watch. This is a wristband for track workers. It will be worn on the upper arm, and it will warn track workers when trains arrive. Why? Because every year alone in Germany, 10 people die while they do maintenance work on track. So they work, train is coming, S-Bahn Berlin, every 8 minutes. And right now someone is looking out for the train, and when the train comes, he blows into a horn. So human failure is possible when it comes to the life of those people. And this device will be connected to a sensor or to our signaling system in the cities, and will warn every single worker, fully automated, all over the world in the future. So that's our plan. That's my pitch about the product.
Cool.
Thank you, Marcel.
Thanks, cool. Marius, can you tell us a little bit more what is Henkel X and what was the idea behind it, and how is it different maybe to what Siemens is doing in the digital lab here in Berlin?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. So I'm Marius, co-founder of Henkel X, and what Henkel X is an open innovation platform that is one of the work streams responsible for digital transformation of Henkel today. And the idea started about January of last year, and we launched in February of last year, because what we found was that for the most part, there are fantastic ideas inside of large organizations, but there's not always a platform where we can experiment with those ideas. And so when we sat down and designed Henkel X, we wanted to focus on digital transformation from the standpoint of ideas are everywhere, and they should come not only from inside of the organization, but also from outside of the organization. There's a famous quote out there from the CEO of Sun Microsystems in the 80s that says, "The smartest people do not work for you," something along those lines. And that's very true. So we've been focused on an ecosystem, or building an ecosystem of amazing partners, and these partners are venture capitalists, these are other corporates, even some of our competitors. These are universities, these are family offices, everybody that you can think of that has an interest in furthering the industry in Germany and beyond. Mm-hmm. And so we bring in all of these individuals into our network and into our organization, and then we basically co-create solutions. Mm-hmm. And then we have this platform through our network partners where we then experiment with these ideas. And that can take the form of either a close collaboration with a startup, so what Philip was doing, and you ultimately build or co-develop a product, to us investing in a startup because the technology is so new. Or you actually build something yourself where someone said, well, you guys should really be doing this. And we've had that a few times where one of our mentors, which we have in our network, have said, have you looked at this? And sometimes it's the obvious things that you miss, but we've then explored these ideas. So Henkel X is a platform, in summary, for coming up with new ideas, mm-hmm. experimenting with those ideas, and ultimately getting those ideas into the market. So to drive higher revenues or save costs.
All right. And was it also driven a little bit by, what's going on in terms of disruptive innovation, and or is it more like the intrinsic need to change your organization within? What's more important?
It's a good question. It was both, know. So we all know. I think digital transformation is probably one of the most misused words, today, because it means everything and nothing. Depends on who you speak to. So what was clear to us was that the rate of change on the outside world is so fast that if we don't move along with that speed, that our organization will be in trouble. And that's not only Henkel, that's every large organization. The number one thing most startups complain about, large organizations or anybody even inside of an organization, is the speed at which they work and how siloed they are. So that's what we wanted to do with Henkel X, is to prove, for one, that we can break down these silos between departments because it's in the best interest for our organization. And two, that we could actually come up with a model where we can work with startups in what we consider best-in-class approach. So we've come up with a framework where from the moment we make contact with a startup to the time we sign an agreement and they're actually starting a proof of concept, it's 4 weeks. Now, for those who are in a startup, will go, oh my gosh, that's incredible, because most lead times with enterprises are 6 to 9 months. So we've created kind of a sandbox environment, again, to experiment with startups and really try to set an example for other corporates that it is possible to work with a smaller organization if the structure is set up properly.
All right. And Ulrich, maybe you can tell us a little bit more how Roland Berger is setting up innovation hubs all over the world for corporate clients.
Yeah. Also, thanks for having me. For me, it's a little homecoming because I've been working for Siemens the first couple of years of my career, so nice to be back in a way, although it was in Erlangen. But I've been working in consulting and the industry on digital topics for the last 10 plus years, and started interacting with the whole startup ecosystems around 2014, when a lot of companies started building innovation hubs and digital labs and became more externally focused in what they do in innovation. Before, it was more inward focused. Right now, I think we're experiencing a lot of companies that have tried out a couple of tools, and they become a little bit more rational, a little bit more financially driven in terms of, okay, let's do what really works. And my CEO now asks me what really has an impact. So we see companies becoming more selective in their activities. And I think insurance was, especially in 2014, a perfect industry to work for, because they were really under-digitalized about 5 years later than banking, and a lot of stuff was happening. All the insurtechs were coming up. Now, right now, I work for a company that deals in construction, and construction material, they're even more far behind. But the interesting thing is consulting them as they tell me, okay, I don't want to spend 5 years on learning. Let's take the learnings from other industries like banking, and let's do it in 2 years. And maybe I can learn this in 2 years. And then what we do is really looking at the client and seeing what their motive is and what they want to move. So it can be something which is really more on the financial perspective, so building up a CVC arm, corporate venture capital, where you build a fund. It can be something more culturally driven, so working together with startups or starting up entrepreneurship programs. It can be also very inward-driven, simply because the industry doesn't really allow you to do a new business model. Like if you're in the German health insurance, the public system, you cannot just do company building. It's not allowed by the regulator. So you automatically focus more on digitalizing internal processes and become more efficient there. Mm-hmm. So I think the bottom line is it's really specific to the customer, very specific to the industry, also what you can do. And we're trying to find the best fields that really work for them.
Mm-hmm.
and don't do this, let's say, innovation theater. Yeah.
Okay, so now we have from different players who are actually doing such kind of startup corporate relationships here in Germany on the ground. But Augusto, I met you when you published a magazine article about this idea of a German-Asian digitization hub, which would be across borders. Tell us a little bit more about it. What is the idea behind it, and what is the big vision for it?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for inviting me. This article was a result of an event which we held internally in Deutsche Telekom. We call it Out of the Box event. And the idea of this event is that any employee can come up with a topic and present it to other colleagues. And just show it, explain and tell. And because I've now 20 years of experience with India, especially with Asia, maybe a little bit Singapore, but that's it. And I've been following the development in Asia, and I have spent quite some time also in Washington, where you have the World Bank. And in my conversations with all the people I met, and in my experiences at work, and now with my role as a digital transformation head, I started thinking, what's going on, because especially the last 10 years have been amazing, mind-blowing, When you look at Asia today and you go back, especially in India, which I've personally seen, I was there in 1997, first time. You go back today, it's a totally different country. If you compare it to Western countries, there is not so much change and not so much speed and dynamic. And I started to look in research papers about what are the factors, and then I had this out-of-the-box event, 1 hour. I took a lot of data. I boiled it down to 20 pages or something like that. And then the feedback was amazing. I got a lot of people inside the company who asked me to come over and talk again about it. So what is it about? It's a couple of factors which we in Europe need to be very aware of. One of the things is demographics. It's a key point for me. Markets are made out of people who consume, and demographics, if you compare US, Europe, and Asia, in Europe, we are growing older and older and older. In Asia, you have lots of countries, lots of different situations. I mean, China has a very specific situation. Japan has a very specific situation. But then you go to other countries like India, for example, very young population, very striving forward population, and demanding more and wanting to have and do more. And if you compare that then with industries who rely on consume, you see that there are specific things which are just, it's interesting to know. For example, before I started the whole research about it, I didn't know at all that Japan and Korea are two countries which are extremely well in robotics. A lot of companies come from there. I think they have over 50% market share globally.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about that,
And what did it lead to? Like, what was like your...
So my thinking was, if we can combine the things where we are good in Europe, and we can combine those which are extremely good examples in Asia, we could even leverage that.
Yeah.
And I came up with the idea to think about a digitization hub, which brings startups and corporates from both ends together to develop products which are helping each other,
Yeah.
I've started to talk also to other corporates here in Germany. I met Marius a couple of weeks ago. It is all about coming together, starting collaborating, because if you have people who come from different areas, from different industries, they bring different thoughts, and many times my experience is when you start collaborating, you get a lot of very interesting results, which you would never had thought about because you are so narrow-minded and in your specific industry that you don't even think about other things, you know, and I find it very fruitful.
And you also suggested 3 major points, like the first one, creating a kind of a fund for it that can be funded by German corporates, for instance, and that helps invest in Asian startups, creating a business exchange platform in order to get the people on the ground localized and getting active there, and also having a new work accelerator. Maybe you can outline it quickly.
Okay, so I mean the order is not of really importance. The importance is the cultural change you have to admit for yourself. So collaboration is first. You know, you need to admit, although you are a champion in something very specific, you are very useless in other areas. So, and that collaboration can then be boiled down to working together in co-working spaces. Or if you have a couple of corporates who are already engaged with startups, you need to create a platform of networks, you know, connect. Maybe, you know, Henkel has something which is very interesting for Deutsche Telekom, and Deutsche Telekom is something which is very interesting for Henkel. Or Siemens. I mean, there is a lot of possibilities, you know. We just need to be open to think out of the box.
Yeah.
And
So
the fund idea is, my experience is, if there's no skin in the game, the people say, okay, you know, that's funny, you can do that, you know, and if you have to put money in, then the people sort of get a little bit scary, but also they want it to be a success, and that's why I thought it would be good to have a fund investing into it. You know, it can work like a venture capital fund, and the rules are the same. You need to make money, otherwise, you know, you would not have any reason for existence. But the idea is collaboration and working together, but coming from different areas.
Okay, so that would kind of be the outlines of, let's say, the ecosystem that would need to be in place. And Marius, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about, you've recently been to India with Henkel, right? Maybe is this the first step to going global as with such kind of a collaboration platform?
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. So I was there 2 weeks ago. I posted something on LinkedIn, so maybe if someone saw it. But so it was 15 years since my first visit in India and also my last visit. But it was just, it's a completely different world. I mean, you talk about, you know, a country that is one, you know, politicians have realized that the future is now. And they're started opening up and their access to funding, really creating an environment where startups can foster. Because in the past, what happened, the best entrepreneurs ended up having to leave because the system wasn't set up properly. And they all went to Silicon Valley and built amazing companies. But what's happening today is the structure has changed in India. And therefore, these entrepreneurs are not only coming back, but the ones that are there are staying. So, Augusto, you talk about demographics. Average age 28 years. Young population. Medium income. Percentage of the population has gone from 26% will go to 40% of the population by 2020. So you have money that's being spent, consumables. You have a young population, extremely well educated, some of the best universities in the world. Cheapest data plans in the world. You pay, I think, €6 for 3 months of like unlimited data. I can't remember the number, but it's absolutely incredible. And you have like over 100 million people who have access to smartphones. The largest English-speaking population in the world, obviously given the large population. I can go on. I was just sitting. We were there for 48 hours, and in meetings from 7:30 in the morning to 7:30 at night. And after 2 days, we couldn't get enough. We just wanted more. I mean, every person you meet had a story and had a great idea. So India, I mean, for any corporate that's in the room, if you're not focused on India now, you're going to be left behind if you're only going to go there in about 5 years from now. The time is now. Same with China. So, we went to India with our Henkel X show and tell event. And last year in November, we went to China to do a similar event. And, India to me today, and people might disagree with me, is where China was about 5 years ago. Maybe even less. But same thing in China. I mean, you talked about robotics. You talked about AI. You talked about commerce. I mean, they're so far ahead of what the Western world is in these 3 areas. I'm sure I'm missing a few, but we see it in our business. We had at the particular event, we had a company called Geek Plus, which coincidentally the week after our event, they didn't tell us this because they were under NDA. They raised 250 million at $1 billion valuation. It was the fastest unicorn, something in like the history of China, and it's robotics. So there's so much capital in China that is being ready and willingness to deploy it. That's a big wake-up call for the Western world. This kind of where we are today, this feeling of, well, I need to protect my home ground. I need to kind of, make sure that my space is protected. That doesn't exist in China or in India, less so today. They've realized that just doing the things that they've been doing the last 5 to 10 years will not get them ahead.
Yeah. And,
I can only second it. We have politicians today who think that protectionism is a solution to the problems, and it's horrible because we're going backwards. We should not do that. And what Marius just said, we need to embrace it. We have lots of things in Germany and Europe which are unique, which are very good products. I think we need to embrace it and to work together, absolutely, because this is the only solution that we can bring societies forward. If we start with tariffs, like now this war which is going on between the US and China, we're going backwards because it's not. It will not have a positive impact. And I was last year in India. We were also looking for startups, and I was amazed. We had startups which were in the IoT space, fantastic solutions. And the interesting thing is, in those countries where there is scarcity of things, the people are very, very clever in overcoming frugal situations, and that makes it so interesting, that with much less resources, they find a very, very attractive solution to problems.
Okay.
If I may, the other thing I see is kind of a little bit of a pervasive problem in Western Europe is the willingness to take risks, especially at the enterprise level. When I compare it to like the US still, but especially China, corporates in the US still, they're willing to make those 1 or 2 big bets, and sometimes they won't work out. But man, if they work out, they're amazing. Whereas in Germany, I think especially, I see a lot of companies there, and you talk to the venture capital community, the reason there are not more exits here is because some of the corporates just don't feel it's the right time to as they say, pull the trigger and make those big, bold bets. And I think until we kind of get the regulatory environment right and also the mind shift right of our enterprises, we are really in trouble.
Mm-hmm. So that's really flying high level and on the macro areas. But Philip, in your daily work, like how much do you already look towards Asia? I mean, does it play a role? Like what kind of tech trends are involving in Asia, or are we talking on a too high level already?
I think also one question that I would give back to you in a second. But first of all, on the working level, to be honest, the startup ecosystem in Berlin, in Germany, is pretty interesting right now. And if you want to build innovations also for a global market, you can go for it here and right now. But if you look at a product like that, parts of the product are from China, parts of the product are from all different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. But sorry for disrupting the panel now. We were talking about, you have to make startup corporate collaboration with China possible. Mm-hmm. So I know it's not common, but question to the moderator. How can corporates really partner with China? And even if you should ask the questions, I think this could be an interesting answer for the people.
Well, I have two views on it. So one is from being a startup founder, where I think it would be really good to have the institutions and the ecosystem in place that Augusto is outlining, because that's obviously what would have been needed for me as a startup founder in order to be, able with the power and the resources of a corporate to launch into a foreign market overseas. I guess what is also needed, obviously, is a better understanding of the corporates locally, because what I'm also seeing is like we work with big automotive companies as well, who know how to, for instance, sell cars in China. However, they have no idea about all those tech trends which are coming up. And then it comes back to what Marius is saying, that those players usually in Germany are very, very conservative, so they take their time. Unless it's not in the numbers yet, for instance, in a daily business, they wouldn't make the big moves in order to say, okay, now we do an innovation hub, for instance, in Shanghai. So I just see the first players starting, for instance, like Lufthansa, they are starting innovation hub in Singapore. But, there's like just tiny bits, but it's not like the big vision, for instance, that we're talking here about corporates forming an alliance together and co-investing, let's say, into a fund or something like that, and having a platform for both German but also Asian startups to collaborate with the corporates here. And
yeah, I think the interesting point that Marius was illustrating is really how diverse the different innovation ecosystems can be. And I mean, in my old function, we had a scouting team on the ground in Silicon Valley and London and Germany, and even between these Western geographies, there were already big differences in terms of how startups are financed, what they are looking for, what the competencies are, what the rules of the games are. So localizing yourself, having someone on the ground to actually connect with the ecosystem, I think is very important. And in my opinion, it has to be more than, and I don't want to sound cynic, but having a tourist group of executives flying over to Silicon Valley and saying, wow, that's really interesting, because this is not really giving you an impact. So I think one of the essential questions will be, okay, how do I make it possible as a German company or someone who comes from Germany to bring over this innovation from the US or from China or from India to Germany? How do I make this work? And this is really not that easy. I mean, in the instance of the US, it really is complicated by the fact that the US domestic market is very big. So the incentive, at least for small startups, to go over to Germany is just rather small. Why should they do it? And even if they wanted to, their global delivery capability to go over to Germany is really limited. So bringing over something with language barriers, with time zone differences, can be very tough. Yeah.
What's your view, like, at which size startups should consider going into foreign markets? Because that would also be a question that I have for Marius. Like, Henkel has all those really cool partners in place, for instance, Founders Foundation. But it seems to me it's like, as a startup who has maybe raised an angel round or Series A here in Berlin, it's even such kind of platforms are not available, because it's really focused at the unicorns or the startups that we hear about in the magazines, but not the ones that are local here. And
it comes down maybe also to preference. Like for us, we feel there's so much happening in technology these days, so it's almost a little bit boring looking at the later stage stuff, because you can see where it's going. So we really like to be very early. We do seed, Series A type of investments. Just in India, again, a story. I met a founder. Now it's her second company that she's done. She grew up in the slums of India. Her dad was bringing 50 rupees home a month. She put herself through Cambridge and Princeton Law, and then built a company, and is now on her second company. So this drive and this hunger to succeed is just phenomenal in that part of the world. And as we think about the corporates, something that we've realized, and we've spoken about it, is unless we work together, it's it's not really attractive for these companies to come to Western Europe because they know that once they come there, they have to pitch to Siemens, and then that's going to take 9 months. Sorry, no disrespect, and Henkel might take 9 months, and every other company might take 9 months. So as Henkel X, we've actually taken an approach that we're trying to build an ecosystem of partners where we can go as one voice to these companies, both in India and in China, and say, look, startup, we've got a consortium of some of the leading organizations in Europe. Yeah, if you want to partner with us, we're going to give you immediate access to all of these corporates. Yeah, and we've set up a framework for you to succeed. You can move with speed. And so we are probably, I feel, one of the companies that's further along and are thinking on this. Yes, it's very difficult to convince everybody, but we're starting to see early, very good progress on this. And I'm very proud to announce that on the 2nd of July, Henkel X, together with some of these industry partners, will host what we call the first X Partners event in Barcelona. And this is where we're bringing in all of these industry players, C-level executives of some of the largest organizations in Europe, to sit around a table and agree on the format to exactly tap into this ecosystem in Asia. So watch the space.
Cool. Maybe a question framed the other way around, Augusto. What happens if this doesn't become a reality? How important or pressing do you see it that such kind of platform will be established?
I don't really understand. What do you mean by if it doesn't become reality?
For instance, like if we don't create such a platform where between Asia and Germany, where the corporates and startups can collaborate.
So we live in a time where platform economies are booming. Yeah. So platforms are the solution for a lot of problems, and there are very good examples. I mean, you look at Uber; they don't have cars yet, but they have the biggest fleet ever. You look at Airbnb; they have no real estate, but they have the biggest offering in how do you say, in real estate to stay, housing. Thank you. And the interesting part is there is no need to invest in real estate, but though you can create a platform and housing is the product all over the world, So this platform idea will come. It doesn't matter who is in or not, but it will come, and the first movers will have a lot of success. And if Deutsche Telekom or if Henkel or if Siemens or whatever company it is, everybody is realizing that there is a need for collaboration. And we have a very good example in the automotive industry, which is not very old. We have BMW and Daimler working together. I mean, who would have thought that this would happen?
Because now they're also realizing that...
they are realizing that they have companies like Tesla, they have companies like Uber, and they are eating a lot of their cake, So they realized if we want to be globally relevant, we need to work together. And they are putting all their mobility activities together, all the digital solutions they have. And I can imagine that this will grow and grow, and there will much more of such solutions come up, So I don't think there will not be a solution to that, or people will not come together. The force of the pressure, especially from outside Europe, is already there. I mean, we see what happens in the US, we see what happens in China, in Asia. I think Europe needs to wake up, and these two companies, to bring up again this example, Daimler and BMW, have seen it. So they thought, okay, we need to do something about it, and this will grow. There will be more companies who will do it.
I think in parts we already see it. If you look at least for the seed segment, you have professional service providers who are providing this context or this ecosystem. So if you take, for instance, Startup Bootcamp, they're focusing on creating at least a temporary innovation ecosystem and also attracting startups from India, from China, from the US to Europe. So it is there, but it's probably not anchored well enough with German corporates to actually make it work.
Yeah. Okay, Marius.
The BMW Daimler example is phenomenal in so many ways, because when I looked at that deal, what struck me was, for the first time, I think they realized that they need to put the consumer first, which is what many companies are still missing. You know, I was before Henkel, I was at Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola is a fantastic company. But 5 years ago, the way Coca-Cola marketed and the way Coca-Cola markets today is very different, because 5 years ago they told the consumer what they needed. Today, that doesn't work anymore. This is the Daimler example to me, was they realized that the consumer doesn't really care whether they climb into a Mini or a smart car. They just want to get from A to B. And that visual is going to start happening in other industries as well, and Henkel as well, and we see it, and any of CPG companies. The brands are being commoditized at a massive rate because of the rate of change on the outside. And in order for you to be successful and be around in a few more years, you're going to have to start partnering with some of your competitors even, and then leverage those strengths so that you become a stronger player in the market. And if you don't do that, you might not be around.
Yeah. Well, I think it's time to conclude the panel, and I guess like this idea of collaborating between corporates and startups in an international way for dealing with the innovation platforms who are coming actually from Asia is still, let's say, at an idea stage right now. So some people like Marius are pushing the boundaries and working on it to make it an reality. On the other hand, we actually need to be more risk-taking, I guess, in general, and need to get this cooperation up and going. Maybe it's necessary to start here in Germany with talks like this. So maybe we can take some more questions from the audience, or two questions if there's anything, any comments on the discussion, or any questions.
Marcel, hi. Hi, I'm Miriam. I'm Marcel's co-founder. And I really like...
You liked Marcel's question.
Yes, I like Marcel's question. I'm a little bit biased here. But I want to take it even further and ask all of you, what would be from your personal position in the company that you're at right now, let's say in 10 years, the absolute dystopia, what would be the Black Mirror scenario from your position?
Yeah, four short answers.
The worst case scenario? That's what you're talking about? Thanks. Okay, to be honest, from a perspective of Siemens Mobility, we wanted to merge with Siemens Alstom. We weren't allowed to. We see competition coming from China. Worst case scenario would be cheaper, faster product development than we can afford or can produce. That would be worst case. But I think we're competitive enough that this won't happen.
I think for a company like Deutsche Telekom, it would be to lose the relation to the consumers with specific individual contracts, to having a phone and a 2-year mobile contract, for example. You know, so the relationship to the customer, to lose it, that would be a dead end scenario, I think.
No, Black Mirror, and it's not just technology, it's also people that change in there. And I guess for management consulting, the worst case scenario would be if people change in a way that they don't see the value in having a relationship with an advisor anymore.
Yeah, I would say what Augusta said, if the consumer is not put first, a lot of bad things will start happening.
Okay, last question.
Last question.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Parth. Thank you so much for your information sharing with us. I work for open innovation for automobile industry in Germany. So I know how difficult it is. So my question to Marius would be, how would you deal not invented here syndrome? Because in automotive industry, when big players are working together, there is always this mentality problem between the players. So from Henkel perspective, how would you deal with that?
It's a very good question. So we are part of Henkel X. We're obviously promoting open innovation to start with, and our message is about, you don't have to do this by yourself. You really will get faster and better results by partnering with somebody. And that's basically the overarching theme of Henkel X. And so we promote this internally, and we've proven it to people over and over again. I will give you an India example where, without getting into specifics, one of the executive committee members of our Henkel branch there said, I've been trying to get this project going for 6 months. I just couldn't get it going. All of these players have a different point of view. It's so hard to get them around the table. And we said, well, what is the problem? And so he explained the problem, and we said, well, we know somebody at Universal Music that can make this go away for you. And we picked up the phone, called the person, and he said, oh yeah, I can do this for you. And within 24 hours, they had an LOI signed. And so the whole not invented here thing, and to your point, they tried a lot of things internally to make it kind of work and retrofit it, but it wasn't working out. And for the first time, our people on the ground realized the power of what an ecosystem can bring you and why you don't have to go about it alone. And that's not an admission that you're stupid or that you don't know what you're doing. You're actually being forward-thinking by saying, well, how can I speed up versus everybody else in the market? Well, let me go out there and get the best of the best and use that to my advantage as opposed to trying to build it myself. I hope that answers it.
All right, awesome. I think we ran out of time. Thank you very much. I hope in 5 years forward, I could have just applied to Henkel X in Shanghai and just go there and
5 years, same 5 months.
All right, yeah. Watch Henkel launch in Barcelona soon. Yeah. Thank you everybody for attending.
And thank you, Marcel.